Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode number 377. My name is Steven, one of the co-hosts of the show. And as always, and especially today, I'm joined by
Ron
and John.
Guys, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Steve.
And hear you.
Yeah, especially today. Are we here now more than ever before? Is that what you're saying?
Possibly. You know what I mean?
So.
Like, I think that's just what it is. It's like we got to see a movie together this week in person.
Yes,
so it's nice to be able to talk about that one time when it's coming out, when this episode drops. And for those listening to the podcast, they're enjoying, hopefully hearing us. I'm enjoying hearing both of you. And for anybody on the YouTube channel watching us, I'm sure they're experiencing the same thing that we're both, or all three of us are experiencing, and the joy in seeing each other in our backgrounds of our different homes. And, as the podcast goes along, our beverage choices. Ronald's got a bottle. I got a blender bottle of water. John. There you go. There it is.
Look at that.
Yeah.
That's like an adult beverage tent.
Yeah.
He's the adult.
You know that it's something adult.
Costco alkaline water, man. Quality of my life has gotten better since getting alkaline water in my life. It's crazy.
That sounded so much like a product placement.
Yeah, for sure. Like a walking ad, which we all are.
Except a sitting ad.
For sure.
So today's episode, I mentioned last week, my pick for our weekly segment, the required viewing, is going to be Riders of Justice, which was a film that came out, not even 3 years ago, 2020, and Mads Mikkelsen is the star of it, and that was the majority of the reason that I wanted to watch it. I'd mentioned last week seeing him pop up in these ads for Indiana Jones and Dial of Destiny, and just recently there's been a lot of conversation on the socials about like Hannibal and Brian Fuller and the rewatch and appreciating it and everything that show was. So it's just been fresh in my mind, and it was like a great opportunity to finally watch this movie that I missed the same year that he had a film that came out called Another Round, which seemed to get a lot more attention, especially around the festivals and of the awards circuit, which is also, I enjoyed that movie, but I never watched this one. So when we get to that, we'll talk more about Riders of Justice. We're going to also, the movie that I mentioned that we all were able to see together is the new film in the Fast and the Furious franchise, the 10th installment, Fast X, which is out now, the day this podcast is released. And we're going to talk about that as our feature review. And then at the end, as we always do, anything else that we may have watched in the past week, we'll kind of go through those bullet points fairly quickly. So Riders of Justice, again, 2020, Mads Mikkelsen, Danish film that I'm not. Had you guys heard about this movie before I mentioned it at all, or
no?
Yes.
Where was it? Okay, so John had some awareness.
I had seen the trailer and thought it looked interesting and weird, and that's. Strangely, it's the movie that you think it's going to be from the trailer. I mean, just because it does feel like it's blending violent action with a kind of weird comedy or something. You can't quite tell, but the trailer had something going for it that seemed more than just straight action. So that's all I knew about it. And normally I trim up my beard a little bit during the week, but I thought in honor of Mads Mikkelsen's beard in this movie, I would not. So. I'll step out behind my microphone for a moment. You can see this is some shaggy.
You guys watch it with subtitles, or did you watch it with English dubbing?
Subtitles
or dub titles? I did subtitles.
I did it dubbed.
What a fool! What a fool!
I can't do dubbed. I mean, like I feel like dubbed. Weird. I think
that's
it's
all
rare.
Netflix. That's all all Netflix content. It's all dubbed.
Well, I guess, but I mean, like, is it them dubbing it? Like, is it Mads Mikkelsen dubbing it, or is it someone other?
Man, the guy's voice that's it's like, hey guys, my wife, my wife is in the sub.
I didn't see that one. Yeah. Hey, say hello to your mother. I don't think I didn't see the dub, but yeah, most of those things are like they have nothing to do with the dub. Like it's just like a Yeah, whether it's net and
No love for the dub.
not in this case Netflix, but I mean I don't know where wherever you watch it. I don't know if they're responsible for the dub or if the dub is pulled in from another, like from the studio or a service, or it's weird how that all works. But yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know that many of the dubs are really that good in my opinion. I mean, so I've definitely watched some, but
Yeah.
this one, it's weird. Like I think we talked about this before, but there's a thing going around, and you can see it pop up on a lot of social media, people posting about this, like the inclination to have subtitles on even when you're watching your native language.
Ooh.
Yes.
Like I feel like I fall into that sometimes myself, because it's weird. Like I feel like sometimes I feel more locked into the show, or it forces me to be more locked
Oh.
into the show than just getting into the habit of like dozing, like not like drifting off and like looking at something else, but knowing that I'm still in because I'm hearing what they're saying. Like even though I understand that that's still an option for me, sometimes when I have subtitles on, like some of the platforms, if I turn it on, it'll be
Yeah.
on the next thing that I watch,
Yeah.
by default.
Yes.
So I'm just like, all right, whatever. I'll just leave it on because it
Yeah.
doesn't bother me. It's not a distraction in any terms. But like, I almost find sometimes that I'm like, shit. Like I feel like I'm like watching, listening, reading sometimes, and I'm just
Yeah.
like, I'm like hyper engaged
Well, okay,
into
Steve,
what
I'm
I'm
gonna
watching.
I'm gonna say that there's two things I think that one is I think I agree that when you're reading it, you can sometimes be so involved in the text of what's being said, that you'll even catch things that normally you would have just thought was somebody muttering under their breath. You would have gotten the gist of it, but seeing what the actual line is, or sometimes if it's dialogue from the next room that you don't really overhear if you're just watching it. But when you see it, it's scripted and it's a line. Sometimes there's like shit you might miss. But the other thing is, I think it both locks you in more, like you said, but it also allows you to be less locked in because you can have a somebody can be running a vacuum and you can still see what's being said, or you can have a fan on in the room, or you can so you can kind of watch almost more absentmindedly and still follow with subtitles, which is something that, yes, I'm saying, like I will sometimes turn on subtitles to if it's like a movie that's got a weird sound mix or something, and then if the platform remembers. But I've gotten
That's
very, very used to sort of reading along with most things that I watch.
Yeah, it's
I
weird.
watched a video essay on Vox that's like saying that like a large majority of it is because you can't hear what the dialogue
mix is weird,
it's related. The mix is related to the way the TVs are made, the way that old TVs just had stereos. The speakers were right up front and they were whatever they were, but you could kind of jack them up and that was it. It was just a stereo mix. But because people have smart TVs, the speakers are down here and there's not enough space to put good speakers, everybody's kind of like, it's a thing. I was telling Aaron, I'm always leaning into audio. Like it's like a strange thing. I mean, like especially upstairs, like our sound bar, I'm like, what did he say?
Right.
Because it's mixed weird, and then everything is mixed differently, and then some things are like you can hardly hear them.
Yeah.
I'm only hearing dialogue and none of the other things, or vice versa. So it's strange.
Yeah.
Real strange.
This is an interesting thing, like not to get off topic, but yeah.
There's one thing about
like,
subtitles. I've been waiting to make this observation though, and I'm just going to point this out. Anybody who watches stuff with subtitles knows this. The one thing that subtitles will tell you in advance, like you're watching something, the one thing a subtitle tells you is if a line's going to be interrupted.
Yeah.
Because there'll be the little dashes halfway into the line, and you'll know lately, and there's a lot of like conversation and interruption on
like
that
cross
show.
talking,
and it's funny to see like, oh yep, this person's not going to finish their sentence. I know they're not going to finish that sentence. It's just a weird thing you notice. It's not important to point out, I guess. But
have you ever watched things that were like, Aaron and I watch a lot of like Asian game shows on Netflix. And if you do it with dubbing and subs, the difference in the dubbing and the subs sometimes it's like a totally different thought. It's like,
I've watched a Miyazaki movie like that before.
Really?
Where I watched the American dub, and then I was like, I feel like, I don't know, I felt like I was maybe missing something, and so I watched the subtitled version, and there was so much more detail in the lines. I felt like it was like, oh, maybe it's a timing thing or something.
I think so.
But it was weird how much nuance was lost in the English dub, which otherwise was nice to watch because they have good actors doing like nice performances. But
Right.
so it gains a little bit, but it lost
That's
It
really
lost,
cool.
yeah, it was an interesting thing to note. The other thing I just want to say, and this is also something I've noticed on Succession, but any show they do this. Um, it used to be scoffs, like that would be in the subtitle a lot. They were
Mhm.
big fans of scoffs for a while, but now I've noticed when someone goes, it says blows raspberries, and I've seen this on several
Oh,
shows. But I'm
close
like,
raspberry.
I just think it's weird. I know that, like, I know why that's there. I'm not making fun of the fact that they need to
Yeah,
describe scoff or they need to describe exhales or inhales. Sometimes
yeah,
you think, why is that there? But you go, oh, if you're not hearing it, you might need to know that context.
yeah,
But I think it misleads a person who can't hear into thinking that they're going like or
yeah.
something like that. Well, to me, that's blowing a raspberry. I don't think of
Or like there's going to be a scene comes up where somebody pulls their shirt up and they blow a raspberry on their stomach. Like
right.
that just
Yeah.
that lets me down if I
Yeah.
didn't get that in a
You're like,
movie.
it's like, I guess that all that raspberry stuff is off camera because I didn't see
Yeah,
anybody
that
lifting
must
their
be in
shirt.
the bonus features.
Yeah.
Okay, but back to Riders of Justice.
Riders of Justice, yes.
I don't know. What did you guys think of this? Ronald, why don't you didn't know anything about it at all. So tell me what you thought of it.
Weepy. I was so weepy, man. This
Yeah.
movie was effective. Like this band of crazy people, bandits, this band of interestingly socially awkward people.
Of guys that
Really,
look like they smell funny.
yeah,
Probably.
yeah, all of them. Like, just really worked for me, man. Like there's just like there's this crescendo that kind of happens with Mads, when he's facing the issues that he's facing. I don't want to give it all away, but like, a tragedy happens.
Well,
And
we spoil in this segment. People knew they could
yeah,
watch it with us.
yeah, it just the circumstances, because it kind of has to do with the twist and all that stuff.
I
But
know, but we always spoil in required viewing. We talk about.
oh, okay.
John
So
is telling you to spoil this.
I'm
Ronald.
saying don't
Oh,
hold back.
Trying to
nah,
say.
Like don't worry
still-
about. All right. Well, I'll
it's-
probably say
it's just
something.
snitching.
Spoilery.
I think it's like a snitching thing. And somebody told me don't snitch when I was a kid. It runs with me. So like when you guys are like, say it, tell on him. I'm like, oh man, I fucking got to tell on this guy. But anyway, sorry. He
Tell on
was-
this movie. I
Tell
want
on
you to
this movie.
tattle on this movie.
Yeah, there's something about the tragedy and we all are parents trying to protect our kids, right? And and love our significant others, and seeing the battle that he goes through with his kid and just with loss, it's something I think that anybody could relate to, but you especially feel it. I couldn't relate when I used to see the things where like somebody's kid would get scared half to death. I can understand because I have a younger sister on some level, but having a kid and seeing like fear and pain in a kid, you just want to take it from them, and sometimes that manifests itself through a coldness. I can honestly say I have some firsthand experience with one half of my parental unit kind of reacting poorly to my personal tragedies, just because they didn't want me to feel it. It wasn't that they didn't care. It was just like, I don't know how to react to this, so I want to be stoic because I want you to be like this
Right.
about it. So that kind of stuff was so well acted. Every person in the movie I liked. It's weird. It's like even the gangsters. It's like, I like these guys. I like these guys. I like the daughter. I liked the boyfriend who was seeming like he would be an asshole, but he was so like, oh man, like it's cool. You punched me in the face. It was like this cool, like there's a lot more love around him. And I think I kind of love that about him. The surprise was the love. Like it's like it's like your family, you create your family. It's really your responsibility to kind of pull the love out of it, like see where the love is. And you could look at a situation and be like, this is the worst thing that could ever happen, or you could be like, man, I'm so glad that people are here for me. It's
Right.
and the only difference between those two things is perspective. And this it was just well written. It shouldn't have worked. It shouldn't have worked between the very violent violence and the tragedy and the weird off-color jokes that were being made. It works though. It works. It's one of the best movies I've seen in the last couple of years to me. It just
Wow.
really touched me, man. Touched my heart.
I see all those things you're saying. I don't know if I had quite that reaction to it, but I totally see all those things that you're saying. I mean, and was thinking about those things when I was watching it. That what was making this interesting was how well written it is, and how how many ideas it manages to get into it, and how like when characters have conversations, they actually have these kind of interesting oddball sort of conversations, that like it's overused to like refer to, say, the Coen brothers or Wes Anderson or someone like that when someone includes a kind of deadpan comedy in the middle of this type of movie. But I think that's almost the league this movie was in terms of that. It as far as like unusual characters, and I'm not saying quirky in the sense of, I don't know what word to use, so I'm going to say quirky. I mean characters who actually are like have quirks, characters that are idiosyncratic and have something going to them. And I still don't understand why the one guy ran out of the car and showed his little butt and cried. I'm still puzzling over that scene. but I think that each one of these characters is like funny and weird, and they say things that are inappropriate. I didn't like the villains as much as you did, Ronald, but because I feel like they were like the tip of the spear for like using slurs and just being generally unpleasant. But I thought that they were it was an interesting story, and I'm not going to try to spoil the whole story, but the whole notion of like the futility of what they're doing, and how the wrongheadedness about some of the revenge that our group of heroes are perpetrating is something I really didn't expect. And it also reminded me, I don't know, it reminded me of what's the guy, the Banshees of Inisherin guy, McDonough. It reminded me of that style a little bit, of like there's violence and there's actual sort of crime movie mechanics of a story, but there's also this other side that's much more interested in the little character moments, almost like Danny Boyle or someone like that might do that kind of thing too, of just like mixing, like you're seeing it's a crime story, but it's not the movie you've usually seen. It's about it's a revenge story. It's a little bit like Taken, but it's not that. It's a little bit like a Coen Brothers crime comedy, but it's not quite that either. And I do think it gets a lot of its energy from being a Danish movie with a kind of Danish spin on that style of comedy and that mood, that sort of bleakness, that coldness you might expect. I really appreciated the overall. I mean, some of the things you're talking about, Ronald. It's just like the overall effectiveness, how nicely made it is, and how back to what we're saying, how good the dialogue is.
Yeah, I think I really liked it too. I mean, I was really happy to see it, and I'm glad I didn't continue to overlook it. But I think the big takeaway for me was kind of what Rana was getting at, was just like not so much how emotional I was watching it, but like the way it kind of accomplishes that like emotional undercurrent with the characters in the midst of, like you said, John, like the crime story or the Coen Brothers-esque film, but I think just like this idea of like how each of the characters that we spend the majority of the movie with are either coping with the tragedy that happens early in the film, or like in some ways, exactly. In some ways, kind of dealing with their own challenges in their lives before everything collides. Before the the idea of this not being an accident brings them all together. And even how the movie, ends up, and if you say the twist or the realization as to like, the path that they were going down and ultimately what, happens. I think that reality for them, especially that character, like the scene in the beginning where he's at that, like, I guess a board meeting or a presentation talking about like statistical and the what the algorithm can kind of predict, not just correlation but causation and things like that.
Right.
And that's the kind of jumping off point for what brings them together, and like his deduction of what happened. And
what do they ask him? They said, somebody on the committee says like, are any of these findings compelling? Or so they say something like,
he's like, what is that going to do for us, basically?
Right. But like they're basically saying like, so you're saying you can predict these things, but what sort of things, and do we care about these kind of things? Like, is it interesting?
Right.
Could you please?
And even the example that he gives, and like in terms of like somebody driving in the winter, and there's there's an accident, like, what are the factors that lead to that? Like, you can see that after the fact. And that's kind of sort of like, it's what he does
when
he sees this event that he is somehow a part of, and it's kind of that's really the light that like of the match that kind of brings this whole thing together, which I thought was really cool. And especially kind of how the movie ends and how this whole journey or this revenge tale ends,
Right.
really speaks to like the whole point he's making in that presentation, and really kind of how that works and doesn't work sometimes. But
And even
I
that
thought
little
that was,
wraparound, is so well
yes,
shot and so
it's
interesting
cool.
too.
It's very cool. And yeah, I mean, Mads is great. I love him in pretty much anything and everything.
Yeah, he's the best.
He really
Yes.
is like one of the
Yeah.
best actors like to watch, and he's so consistent. And even beyond the performance, and there's a few actors like this, but like even beyond the performances, which are always consistent, even if he's something, the best part of something that's not good. And that's not the case
Right.
for this. I think this movie's very good. But like even beyond his performance, what he's saying, what he's doing, anything like that, he's just so much fun to watch.
He's
He
Like
interesting.
is.
he's
Yes.
so, yeah, I'm immediately engaged with him before he even says a word or moves. Like the first scene that he's in when he's just walking around that army base or whatever, that military base, there's so much going on with that phone call with his wife. And like he's just, I don't know, man. I just those like subtler scenes with him in this movie really speak to what I'm trying to describe. Like he doesn't have to be killing someone or beating someone up or any of those things. It's
Gotcha.
just like even when he's quiet and not doing anything, he's still so much fun to watch on the screen.
Yeah.
And it's kind of that's I don't know, for me that's kind of rarefied air. I think he's pretty special in that way, and not so many
Yeah.
people fall into that category. But and again, that's what drew me to wanting to see this to begin with. But yeah, I thought this movie was great. I mean, I love the balance of, you kind of nailed it, John, with like all these kinds of movies that it kind of seems like, but it's not, but it is sort of still.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of mashup really works for it. And all the stuff with the daughter and kind of even how the movie ends. I really enjoyed this movie. I'm really
Me too.
glad I finally got to
I
check it out.
love the scene where they go to see the guy who pulls the gun on him at the door, and they're all about to leave, and then he like turns around and goes back, and that's like the John Wick
Yeah.
kind of moment. But it's so funny seeing them react to what he just did, like to
Yeah.
the fact that
Yeah.
what they're involved. It's that thing of like, oh shit, who did we just hook ourselves up with,
Yeah.
and of course that becomes kind of the tone of the movie, that the violence escalates from there. But that scene is just a fun, I love that idea of like you're going through your story and it's already interesting enough, and you find the guy and he's going to help you do the thing. Oh, but the guy you found that's going to help you, he might be a psychopath, or he might at least have issues to work out, that now
Yeah.
you're sort of on the, it's like being the cab driver in the movie, what is it, Collateral, where it's
Yeah.
like you figure out the guy that you're dealing with is not just a crook. He's like maybe a malevolent force or something. And in this case, it's like, oh, wait, we're with a guy who's like gonna do this kind of thing. And then I think what they do at the next, like that guy going in to clean up, I thought that whole, I don't know, it's an interesting rhythm. Like little reveals happen when you don't expect a reveal to come. And then we meet a character in that apartment that turns out to be one of the sort of heroes of the movie in a lot of ways too. What's his name, Babashka or Babadushka or something?
Yeah. Something like that. I don't remember the name.
Anyway, but so yeah, that it's just like you don't know what's about to happen in this movie. Like
You
it really does
don't.
keep you guessing on the shape of it. Even though when it
Yeah.
gets to the end, it does resemble maybe the movie you thought you were seeing from the beginning, but it's got such an interesting way of getting us to that final scene. It's not what you could have predicted.
Right.
Yeah. Great
Cool.
movie.
All right. Well, what's up next? You're up, John, right?
All right. Well, every now and then for one of these, you have to just pick one of those movies off of your should see it list, the movie that you've read about or heard people mention many times, and it's just time to see it and win better than for this show. So this is a movie from 1973 that was remade. Let me see, when was it remade? It was remade in 2014 by one of our most famous directors, and I'll say who that is in just a second. But the movie is you see it referred to as a blaxploitation movie. You'll see it referred to as a vampire movie, but it's Ganja and Hess from 1973, directed and
Really
written
like
by
that movie.
Bill Gunn and it's starring Dwayne Jones, who people may know as Ben from Night of the Living Dead, the original Night of the Living Dead, who's like maybe the breakout star of that movie. And I think this is one of the only other major roles he played. Like he really didn't do a lot of parts before his death in the 80s, Dwayne Jones. So I've always been curious about Ganja and Hess. I did not see The Sweet Blood of Jesus, which was the Spike Lee remake. But yeah, this is one that I just feel like it's a blind spot for me, and I should have seen it by now. So so Ganja and Hess, or Ganja and Hess, I guess. I don't know, but I think it's Ganja.
Cool.
Do we
That
know
has to
where
be
it's
on Tubi.
available? Yeah, okay,
I think it's all over. One thing is there are a couple of different edits of it. I think the proper edit is like an hour and 53 minutes. There's like a 78-minute edit that was recut, kind of taken out of the director's hands and recut.
Wow.
And I think released under a different name. But yeah, the version, what was it called? Blood Couple, which is a pretty weird name. But anyway, the proper version is around an hour and 53 minutes. But I do, it's out there. I did not actually check to see what the best.
So it's on Showtime if you have that. And it's on, well, in terms of streaming, it's on that, and it's on Fubo.
Okay.
And then it's available to rent on a couple different platforms or purchase on a couple different platforms as well.
Yeah.
Cool.
I have never heard of this film. So
really,
I've heard that it's very, very like artsy and like kind of nightmare-ish, like in terms of like dreamlike imagery, but then really kind of horrific stuff. And it's supposed to be a critique of the hypocrisy of Christianity as it relates to Black people. And I don't know, there's all these things you hear about that are not the vampire movie story. I've heard the log line mentions the kind of supernatural stuff, but it seems like it's going to be one of those movies that's trying to cover a lot, because I believe the director Bill Gunn said he did not want to make a vampire, what was it, the Black vampire movie. He wanted to do something. The last thing I want to do is make a Black vampire film, he said when he accepted the project. So I'm not sure why, but it's like a socially conscious director who's trying to do something that's not Blaxploitation, but for some reason people still call it that. You've seen it, Ronald, so maybe you know better than I how well it fits that genre or not.
Yeah.
But I have no real expectations of this movie outside of just the I expect it to be something very unique.
I saw it a really long time ago, but I remember how beautiful it was. It was like one of those like mandatory dad movies. He's just like, hey, but I don't remember anything besides. But I did see The Sweet Blood of Jesus. So I'm super curious how this one is in comparison.
The only thing I've heard, because I dug into it a little bit, is that some people said that this movie actually was noteworthy at the time because it kind of broke from the Blaxploitation tendency to like objectify women and kind of really lean on the male gaze. This movie took a more artistic approach to that stuff, and that the Spike Lee movie, they say, doesn't do that. And I've also, there's general criticisms of Spike Lee maybe not being of one of his areas of greatest sensitivity is maybe not how he handles female characters sometimes. So I've heard that I've heard that The Sweet Blood of Jesus is a little bit more like just possibly sexually graphic and exploitative versus this movie, which is supposed to be more artistic. But that's about all I know.
Cool. I'm excited, man.
Yeah.
I don't remember anything about this movie, so it'll be.
Do you remember anything about Fast X?
Yeah, you beat me to it. I was like, that's pretty fresh still, right? We had a great conversation post screen that we should have probably just recorded.
Yeah, probably just recorded.
But the Fast X, there we go. Nice transition, John. Out now in theaters. Again, the 10th film in the franchise. What was supposed to be a 2-part finale.
I thought it was just cross promotion with Gas X. I had no idea that X was in the title.
Oh,
okay. Makes sense though.
Yeah, I don't know what's the come of this franchise, but apparently, like I was saying, it was supposed to be 2 films. The beginning of the end is how they've marketed this film. But at the premiere, Vin Diesel made a comment about there possibly being 3 films. We'll see. That there's not going to be 3 films if these movies don't make crazy box office. Tracking's down for this one, and I think that's why they're doing all this last minute promotion in terms of like a 5-minute reel that they released, like the spoilers that came out of the premiere about some things that happened in the film. But I don't know, man. Fast X is an interesting watch. I think among us, I think we're kind of at varying degrees in terms of just our feelings about the Fast franchise as a whole. In general, personally, I'm a pretty big fan of it. I do feel like the last few films, including this one, have really kind of pushed me further away from it. You know, in terms of it being like genuine excitement for a new installment to come out, and what it's become, and what I feel more like now is it's more of like a, well, I guess I'll see this because, you know, like I
Yeah.
used to love these movies in some manner, but like I gotta just see how it ends, or like what's happening now. I don't want to say it's like a hate watch because I don't know that it's to that level, but in general, I thought this movie was horrible.
Okay. There's so much to say. I'll just say we should all give.
I
Our
wanted to jump
credentials.
off and just say it, John.
Well, but I mean, like,
Personally,
there's a part of me that one of the points I wanted to make with this is I'm sort of glad, because these aren't, as you alluded to,
Yeah.
you know, we have different degrees of interest. The Fast and Furious movies are not my jam, but I have enjoyed talking about them with you guys, and I have also enjoyed the sort of trajectory. I like to notice the sort of the ramping up of the craziness in these movies,
Yeah,
and then that
yeah, yeah.
became the line, and then that became the thing of like, well, now they're going to say they know what people are saying, and so now the movies are just kind of matching the sort of internet talk about, well, they should do this in space, or they should do it underwater, or whatever. So there is a point where it becomes not even self-parody, or it's something else. But this movie felt like a parody of a Fast and the Furious movie to me, almost like even the dialogue scenes, even the dramatic moments. But I will just say I am glad to see a movie with you guys in the theater in 2023 that is this expensive and this fucking like dumb and weird as this movie. I do agree that it's got like some dull stretches, as you were saying, Steve, that there's kind of a flat line to some of the character stuff, but there's something about this movie's particular flaws that make it such an interesting, it's not like The Room or something like that, but there are a lot of decisions that are just oddball decisions that went into this kind of huge movie. And we just don't usually see franchise movies these days that haven't had some of these issues worked out before we see them.
Right.
And so there is something about that I found very, like, that was the most entertaining thing about the movie. There's one moment in particular that made the three of us all laugh out loud. And it's just like, I don't know, was that joy? Was that exasperation? What was that laugh? But whatever it was a wonderful moment to share with my two friends. And I'm glad I saw this movie with you.
I think, Ronald, you enjoyed it the most out of the three of us, right? I think.
Yeah, but it wasn't
He used
good.
the word fun.
It was
He never
fun.
said good.
Right.
But that's
you use
but
fun, right?
Fun is of varying degrees, right? Like fun, there's some things like Bull Run could be fun, but doesn't mean you'll ever do it again. You know what I mean? Like this feels like that movie. Like I've never watched this. There's no way in fucking hell that I'm ever turning this movie on by myself. Like I'm not going like with my hand telling my brain to do this thing. That'll never happen. If it shows up on TNT, you know how like TNT plays a lot of those movies, and a clip comes on, or I'm at somebody's house, of course I'll sit and watch it. But this is not it. Whatever it is, whatever it used to be, it stopped being that. And some of it has to do with like the pacing, the you guys were talking about, kind of the blandness of the dialogue. And I don't know, like it's almost like sometimes you see these memes of like a person trying to like, I'm not even going to say this. This is a really inappropriate thing to say on a podcast. You see memes of like people trying to do things to themselves, or like as a compliment, like, yeah, you jerk yourself off or something like that. Yeah. That's a mild version. But it feels like this movie is like handshaking itself more than trying to be a good movie.
Yes, Ronald. Oh my gosh, that's so like I was thinking
good.
I was going to sound crazy if I said that, but it felt like even Jason Momoa's sort of antics, which bring a little bit of life to his scenes, but they still feel totally unpolished, and they totally feel like a room full of like meatheads going like, yeah, that's great, that's funny, and all that character stuff, the dialogue that we're talking about in this is like stuff that feels like who thought that, like the stuff between Ludacris and what's her name, Khaleesi's friend, where they're standing on the balcony and they're talking about like her computer skill, her car knowledge, or what. It's just the most like, it's the dullest like dialogue ever, but it's meant to be like funny banter, but it's like everybody's sort of, you said it after we saw it, Steve. It's like everybody's sort of buying into the fact that this is what it is, and so they're kind of going through the motions almost.
Yeah.
Of what is a Fast and Furious movie. And it's not even like it's the worst. I mean, if you look at these movies, there's certain attempts to do certain things this movie. I think this is an attempt to bring it back in a little bit and make it a little bit more human scale, but with the sort of level of the stunts they've been doing. And you know, there's moments of there's a couple of cool looking stunts, or there's a couple of fun moments that crack through the surface, but it doesn't feel like a very inspired entry in the series, which is why it's strange that this is like we're kicking off a trilogy with this movie that feels like it's the out of gas version of this franchise. It feels like in so many ways.
But I mean, I don't want to. Jason Momoa was the best part of this movie, though. That's the weird part. You're saying this, and you're right. Like there was some like. It did feel like that. Like it did feel like there were takes.
But they were just letting him riff.
They're just letting him
Right.
riff. But also, like,
yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
This movie's quality is so poor on a very basic level. Like, what is a story? What are we doing? How's this going? That Jason Momoa is kind of the relief from that, like, dullness that keeps happening, the blandness that keeps happening. He's the remedy for it. Man, I have to say something, man. Vin Diesel might be the worst. You know how, like, they talk about draft picks in the NBA, or like, he might be the biggest bust of all time. He might be like, there's something like Groot, incredible character, right? But it's very basic and all that stuff. But like Vin Diesel as an actor, especially when it feels like he's grasping at straws. Like he's bought into his hype. How doesn't Denzel buy into his own hype, or like Tom Cruise buy into his hype so much that they can act in between them being incredibly charismatic people, right? Sure, they may do some movies that we may not love,
right?
But they still maintain a sense of like, I'm an actor, I'm delivering something to this. I don't know what Vin Diesel brings to a movie anymore. I don't know what
they have a non-zero amount of stage presence, or not of screen presence.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
And I found that like Vin Diesel's. That's what I was thinking about, was
he doesn't
like
have
his
it.
screen presence. Well, or just his screen presence just doesn't. It's not. I was thinking personally, not knowing if people in the world around me were loving or hating this movie. I was just watching it going, man, he's just not really clicking with me. Like his screen presence is just not engaging me the way that those people that you just mentioned, or the way these people who can kind of hold the screen. And also, there's a cameo, I guess, one of those leaked moments that's one of the post-credit scenes, or the post-credit scene, that is an actor who has now become like a negative screen presence for me. Like there has to be something to get me back in the black with Mr. Dwayne Johnson, because like I just feel like at this point I'm I think maybe I'm blaming him for Black Adam and all that kind of stuff when I see him now, but it's like I feel very much like that's a problem across this movie. And the other people who you might like to see a little bit more, you know, there's fun actors that pop up, but like Jason Statham, don't expect a lot of Jason Statham in this movie. If you're a fan of Jason Statham, don't expect this to be like a shining moment for Brie Larson. What's the guy who we described his hair dye matching his tanning lotion or whatever in the one scene, Richmond, what's his name?
Oh yeah, Alan Richmond.
If you're a fan of his, don't expect this to be like a great outing for him. It's like, that's what we're talking about with some of this blandness, is that you got this entire huge cast together, but there's not a lot of like great moments to go around for these actors at all.
Richson
is really Richson, whatever he is. I don't know. It's such a weird conversation. I wanted to comment on Ronald's point about like Momoa, because I do think that he is kind of the best part of the movie, but I think at no point is that character like genuinely like menacing, or you know, a real scary villain per se. Like he's doing things that are just like very Joker-esque.
I think he's trying to be Joker.
Right,
He's Dominic Toretto's Joker for sure.
Sure, and that may be the case, especially if they're saying like this is like one of 2 or 3 movies that he's gonna, you know, step across multiple films as like the final, you know, big bad of this franchise or whatever. But I just think
for
that, like,
either 2 seconds or 2 minutes. It's hard to know how long his character was supposed to be dead.
Right. I just feel like, you know, that stands out like a sore thumb in this movie because everything else is so either just, I mean, personally, like not funny when it should be funny or funny when it shouldn't,
Yeah.
and kind of like even like we were kind of like, oh wow, this is only 2 hour and 20 change, like this is like a smaller big crazy
a
blockbuster.
brisk movie, right?
Right. And I personally felt like it felt longer. I felt like the
100%.
pacing of even an action car chase stunt movie, that should be the thing that doesn't feel like that because you're so engaged in all of these. And the movie does this in terms of like all these set pieces that change and locations and scenes.
Yeah.
But they're so abrupt and so like kind of like
Music video-ish.
broken. What?
Like a music video.
Yeah, like they're so broken apart, like because they're trying to fit in this location or this character to bring back, or like the Statham comment, like he's in basically one real scene, and that whole scene setup is like taking like a core group of characters that are in this movie, or you think are going to be a big part of this movie, and they're kind of just really just moving around in the background of this entire movie when nothing that they're doing is really having any impact on the quote unquote story of what Jason Momoa's character is trying to do to the group and or to Dom or whatever. I just think that already the conversation's probably been spent too much time talking about any kind of logic around this movie.
Right.
I mean,
we're not trying to be those guys though.
Right. But I just feel like, this is a franchise that has been able to pivot around a lot and be, put out a couple different kinds of fast films. And I think I mentioned to you guys when we left theater, I think one of the biggest mistakes it makes is trying to build this film off of arguably one of the best films in the franchise, which was Fast Five, having Jason Momoa's character be from that big safe break sequence. And, I just feel like that movie really kind of was a lot of the best of what the franchise did in terms of, some of the corniness, some of the cheesiness, but some great stunts and like a really cool villain and good sequences.
Yeah.
And then you kind of bring that story into this, and that's the whole like motivation for what this villain's doing, literally that sequence of the film. And it's so on the nose because like even in the post-credit sequence that John mentioned, it's like why would they bring this character back?
Right.
Because you need a voiceover of the villain saying, oh, it's not just Dom, he caused it, but you shot him. Like you actually killed him. It's like that kind of like just so on the nose and so like.
See, I would say that people who only listen to the audio version of the show, you need to just see the face that Ronald made when Steve was talking about that because it's worth it.
Because it felt like Saw. Like it felt that part.
It
felt
did.
like
It
they were
did.
just like
You're right.
all of
You're
your
right.
life you've lived in
And
this.
And you know why it felt like Saw? Because the sequence, what's he doing? He's just in a fucking abandoned theater watching a bunch of monitors
and like screens. No, totally. You're so right.
It really elicits that feeling. I thought the same thing watching. It's like,
is this Saw? What the fuck?
When's Jigsaw popping?
Well, he did have that one scene, that one creepy scene that you were commenting on how the audience reacted to that.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
So they are trying to position him, and there's the one scene earlier with how he manipulates people to do what he wants. That's pretty hardcore. But like, so they are trying to set him up to be this like devilish presence, this villain who I think is supposed to kind of, I think we are supposed to find him menacing and not just goofy, but there's almost no way to find a guy goofy, anything but goofy, I should say, if he's like standing a mile away from the action and like looking on a laptop screen and like playing with a remote control and kind of doing little dances and stuff. It's like he's. But again, yes, I agree with you guys that whether it's like a jock being funny or not, which it is, it still has some life. There's something to, like, you can see how Jason Momoa is at least probably having fun or something. And I do think that that is like the one spot of the movie that has that kind of unusual life to it, or that feels that unpredictable. The rest of this thing really does feel kind thought about the fact that the scenes don't really connect to each other that much. And people who go to see this, if you're expecting a complete story, I would say back those thoughts off a little bit too, because this movie just, doesn't really end with a feeling that the elements so weird, came together at all.
Yeah.
Which is unusual for this series. Usually at least there's a self-contained narrative that wraps up.
It's just so disappointing to me. I mean, like I'm mentioning at the top, like the degree to which the three of us really kind of like these films in general or really care about this franchise, because like the Vin Diesel comment is very accurate because it is something where it's like this is the thing that he can hold on to, even though he went away and came back to the series. There's no doubt that he has a very aggressive amount of control over these films and this franchise.
Yeah.
And, as reported, it was probably a big reason that Justin Lin left the film. And, Louis Leterrier comes in and directs this. But I just feel like that makes everything suffer, if I'm being blunt. Like,
Hell
Ronald's
yeah.
comment about like what is Vin Diesel's like real appeal or his value. I do feel like he is, I mean, he is a character, a brand, a personality that has like found a couple properties that just will ride him off into the sunset with, because
Yeah.
I don't think my only like what beyond these kind of genre type things, like Boiler Room is really his best movie in my opinion, like an actual performance in that movie.
Yeah,
And
I
it's
was gonna
not
say
like a
Iron Giant, but I guess
well,
that
yeah,
doesn't
that
quite count.
again, that
Yeah.
would be good too. Yeah, I just mean like
But no, you're right. It's like
see his physical,
yeah.
yeah, like the performance and everything. Like I just feel like he's gotten to this point where like he's really kind of that ego or that approach. I don't even know. Like it's doing nothing but hurting these films. And like I feel like that break from building up, when the series comes back at 4 or 5, it peaks, 6 and 7, it peaks, in different ways. I just think that when that happened, and some people might say 7 is the best one. I love that film too. It's one of my favorites. But I think from there, every time I've gone to these movies, I've been less and less excited to see it and more disappointed as I watch them,
Yeah.
because it's just such diminishing returns, and the scales have just tipped so far in everything that John's described about, the way it's kind of buying into its own thing, or how Ronald described it. It's just like I just feel like everybody's just everybody's just saying okay to everything, and there's like
Yeah.
really no genuine intent to like make something great. It's just like catering to expectations, trying to give more of what worked at one point, and that all kind of being shoehorned in
Yeah.
by Vin Diesel or the director. I don't know. It's a really weird thing. I want the movie to succeed, because you want theatrical to succeed, but it's weird. I would not be shocked if this movie, I mean, underperforms even what Fast 9 did coming out during the pandemic. I hope I'm wrong, but I mean, first 2 weekends we'll know for sure whether or not this movie is going to be coming to home video sooner than later. But I don't know that this is a 17-day VOD, but I think it'll probably be available. Just like this, I mean, you think about Mario, and when that's available, this is a movie that you're going to have probably within a month or so at home.
Yeah.
So some people that aren't going to hear great word of mouth, they may wait for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's going to affect, the performance of the movie. But
And maybe we should get our listeners to write in and when they think it was that we all laughed out loud, because it's
Please do.
you might be able to guess it. The thing I noticed about this movie, and this is a really something I really didn't think about until the day we were going to meet for this. And Ronald, you sent us a link to a YouTube video with a woman describing sort of the general plot line and timeline of all the Fast and Furious movies. And so I refreshed my memory. And I realized as I was watching that and sitting down to watch the new one that I never saw Fast 9 or whatever it was called.
Yeah.
Like I didn't see it. Like I guess I thought I saw it. It was one of those that I thought I saw and just forgot. But I was like, oh yeah, I remember all the jokes about them going to space, and then I remembered they actually did it this time, and I remembered knowing that, but I never actually saw the movie. So that was. Now I'm wondering. I'm asking you guys: do I need to go back and watch the 9th one? Okay, so I can spare myself that.
You spare yourself the time.
I'll spend that time watching Ganja Hess instead.
Yeah, sure.
It's weird though, because that one was one where like, oh, Justin Lin's coming back to the franchise because F. Gary Gray did 8, and it was like,
yeah,
it
Lin
had a
was
couple
supposed to direct this one too, so it's
right. He left the weekend of production, but I'm just saying, like, there are some redeeming things in 8 and 9, specifically like some stunts and things like that were cool, but not much, to be blunt. And I think that like this just kind of again is just like the continue of that slide down. Some people, I think some audiences will really enjoy this movie, especially if you're in the bag for this franchise, because I do think it does fix some of what a lot of people didn't like about 9.
Yeah.
And and kind of get it back in a specific lane, but it's like it overshoots that lane and then some, with like how ridiculous the dialogue and like the character moments, and it's kind of absurd how, if you think about how many scenes are in this movie and the spread of the characters in those scenes.
Yeah.
Like there's really just Vin Diesel and maybe Michelle Rodriguez that has more than like 3 genuine sequences in this movie. And that is just like, that's really stretching this family too thin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I wanted to like it. I wanted to enjoy it. I just simply, I don't know. Like I told you, I didn't. I don't even know if I really found it to be fun personally. Like
Dang.
maybe I'd watch it again. Like I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. What we'll have to see. They're calling this their Infinity War. So maybe I'll have to see what their end game is. Yeah, but it's out in theaters now, and tons of people are for sure going to see it. So
Yeah, definitely.
Um, anything else you guys want to mention, having watched that you checked out over the last week or so?
Just one thing.
Let's hear it.
Hulu's Dear Mama, which I really was like, for a person who is a very huge Tupac fan, to have a perspective that even goes beyond some of the things that I knew, was just kind of special. Yeah, it really is about his journey and how it relates to his mom and her contributions to who he is, just like her Black Panther past, who she is as a person, her addiction, that, and it's told by Alan Hughes, one of the Hughes brothers, Menace to Society. For those that don't know, the unacquainted, Tupac was actually supposed to be a menace to society. Never got into it. Why? Because he beat the brothers up. One of the brothers is directing the documentary and somehow is coming through without shitting on him the whole time, because he was beaten to a pulp, and still he mentions it and how he felt about it and why he chose to do the documentary in the documentary. It's just special, man. There's a reason why he loved him. This is how much he loved him. He beat him half to death. He recovered. He sued him. And then he's just like, I love him. I still love him. I'm going to make a documentary about it. It's crazy. So a lot of footage that had rare footage, some pictures you probably haven't seen before. Some Baltimore friends, really cool. Some of his classmates from School for the Arts, and some of his friends in New York and in California. And it's just, this guy was young, man.
Is that why that picture of him and Jada Pinkett was making the rounds?
The one that keeps surfacing, like the ad campaign,
right? For the school, you know.
Yeah.
That's where I teach, so it's I know you hear those names mentioned, but that picture
100%.
was still interesting to see. But it was totally like a publicity shot, like they're standing in front of lockers and they just look...
Yeah, it's really cool, man. But it's worth checking out. The story about this one particular story where he shoots 2 undercover cops that are attacking an innocent guy in Atlanta, and the way that Tupac gets on one knee like military style and starts shooting at the cops is so like, and when you see the context of it, when the story's being told, it feels like a warm story, because like, he's a superhero. You know what I mean? In some ways, like, he really did not like people getting pushed around or hurt in front of him. He was like wildly defending people around him, and I can relate that to that on some level. It's really worth watching.
Is it a film or is it a series?
It's a mini series, a limited series. It's 5 episodes.
Okay, cool.
Real fun. It's a fun watch. Sad as shit, but it's fun at the same time. Yeah.
It's fun and sad.
It's fun and sad. What about you guys? What have you checked out?
I wanted to mention just one show that I kind of caught up with that I had been very excited to watch, which exactly zero. I actually polled the internet and 0 people are talking about this show.
Okay.
And it's another example of like Apple TV having great products,
Okay.
but nobody having any clue what the fuck they are or how to who's in it. But I've caught up on Silo.
How is that?
It's so good. It's so good.
I don't want to watch that.
Yeah, like first off, just because Rebecca Ferguson is there, and I'm just like, I'm in.
Yeah.
And she's incredible in it. And it's got this really interesting Will Patton's in it. Who else is it? Tim Robbins is in it. David Ayawolo. I forget who else. Yeah, I don't know. It's a really great cast, and in the movie, I mean, the show does a lot of this, like, kind of this kind of jumping around a little bit in time, to kind of spend time with these characters at different points in this silo's creation and present day. But basically, the synopsis is: in a ruined and toxic future, thousands live in a giant silo deep underground. After its sheriff breaks the cardinal rule and residents start dying mysteriously, engineer Juliet starts to uncover shocking secrets and the truth about the silo. So David plays the sheriff, and she plays Rebecca plays Juliet. But it's got real heavy Lost vibes. So if you're a fan of that series, wherever you fell on that series, but it's just, again, we talk about it all the time on this podcast, but like the production value, cinematography, like just this world that's built, in this show. And I guess I've only seen the first 4 is what I watched. I watched what has aired so far. Maybe one extra one, but just a super cool, like, question of like, why are we in this silo? And it's like everybody's bought into this idea, but then someone starts to question it, and brick by brick, this wall comes down, figuratively, of like this legacy, this story, this belief of what life is like and why we have to live this way. It's really great, and it's on Apple TV again. It's one of those things, man. Comes out on Fridays, I think. There's the day this podcast comes out, I think episode 4 drops. But if you like Rebecca Ferguson, any of the cast that I just mentioned, or if even mentioning Lost would get you to watch it, I would highly recommend it. It's gotten some really good reviews early on. But yeah, it's great so far, and that's called Silo. SILO. That's all I got, John.
I already mentioned I've been catching up on Succession, and I am now fully caught up on that show. And they just had an episode that was pretty amazing stuff. But there's plenty of people out there talking about that show already. But I will say that if you're I don't know, I guess it might depend on where you fall on the political spectrum. But the most recent episode was sort of an election night episode that dealt with the inner workings of let's just say a Fox News like news organization on a major a presidential election night. And it was very PTSD from 2016 election night. Definitely it definitely will trigger some of that, but also it was just
very triggering,
but also just very much in keeping with this show's storytelling to believe that episode felt like it could have been that this felt like a climactic moment for the show, that it was like a lot of the players involved, and a lot of the this thing about Succession, the dialogue so well written, the performances are so great. It's like a nice looking show. It's it really did. It's sometimes hard for an episode of that show to stand out above the others, because it's a lot of people walking up and down hallways and sitting in the same offices and insulting each other cleverly. But this was one of those standout episodes that you could point to, or you could imagine people pointing to when they look back on this great show. So 2 more weeks to appreciate Succession.
It's crazy, man. It's one of my favorite shows, and this season's been incredible, I thought. And this last I mean, every episode has been great this season, but yeah, it's just like, they've done this amazing job of like kind of giving characters real moments in each episode, and it feels so balanced, and like it's just really pretty amazing how they've kind of run this up to like the final 2 episodes, and it's crazy that that's all we're gonna have.
Well, Steve, you mentioned those given the moments. Like, I was thinking about how, like, in the last couple 3, there have been like climactic moments of a sort for each of the characters, they've either gotten a win or a loss or something like a step forward. So it's getting to that point where a lot of great shows get to, where you look at the last 2 episodes and you go, well, I don't know what they have to deal with. Like they've dealt with so many of the things that you thought might be the end of the show already.
Yeah.
Like there's something that happened earlier in this season that you thought might have been the end, but it's not. And so it, it reminds me of the way Better Call Saul wrapped up a certain part of its plot line, and there were 4 or 5 episodes left for you to go, oh wait, what is this show now that we've come to this point? And I think Succession is doing that too, of like giving you time to feel like when it really ends, it's going to feel like, oh, they really exhausted the possibilities of this. They didn't just come to an obvious stopping point and then like, turn off the story. This is, it feels like there's climaxes coming, and it's hard to say that you really are rooting for any of these characters, but there are still a couple of like semi-happy endings that you can sort of hope for, but I don't know if this is that show.
Yeah, it's a good one for sure. I honestly feel like it's going to go down as one of HBO's better shows of all time. Like
So
if
consistent.
if they land this, and I have no doubt that they're going to. Like if it really kind of lands, that's the key. Like every season is great, and all the character work is just top notch. They're performing anybody, like they're all could be nominated for Emmys. I'm sure they will. It's just like it's such a quality show, and it's that HBO. That's that goodness right there. Yeah, HBO's got a brand of goodness, and I'm just like the silo description that I'm giving like for Apple TV. I feel like they got these special shows, but obviously Succession has a great audience, and I can't wait to see how they end it, man.
Yeah.
Sadly, but I'm excited. All right, guys. Well, that's it for the episode. Moviestrivia.com is the website. You can go there to catch up on past episodes or to subscribe to the show if you don't already in the podcast platform of your choice. And then youtube.com/movie podcast if you want the video element. If, like John said, if you wanted to see Ronald's face when I described the stinger for Fast X, you would have missed that unless you are on the video side. So
it
go
was
there.
A stank face.
Hit subscribe, hit the bell so you get all those alerts when the new episodes hit YouTube. But we'll be back next week. I have no idea, besides John's pick for required viewing, what we'll be talking about next week. But there's some new stuff coming out all over the place, but I'm sure we'll find something fun to discuss. And as always, you've made our day. Thanks.